Hello and welcome to Sensational South. I'm Harish Upadhyay. Over the next 30 minutes, we bring you all the major news and newsmakers from across South India. Now, a new parliament with a bigger space has triggered new fears. Parties in South are worried about the delimitation process. BRS working president, Mr. KTR, is asking all parties from South to fight the delimitation process. So why are parties in South India worried? Look at this report. We'll come back and debate the issue.
The centre's proposed delimitation in 2026 based on population has once again sparked fireworks and triggered a north versus south debate.
I think one has to be very, very careful when one changes the representative structure of a country. These things should not be done flippantly.
Calling it a gross injustice and discrimination, Bharat Rashtra Samiti's K.T. Ramarao urged all 5 southern states to raise their voice against the move. Echoing the same sentiment, other leaders too expressed concern.
This will have very serious political consequences and will be penalizing those states, particularly southern states, which have complied with the national policy. So this is totally unacceptable.
We are being punished for being progressive. We are being punished for controlling the population. We are being punished for giving the highest highest taxes back to the central government.
The states which have not adhered to this population control measure, who have not contributed to the economic growth of the country, will stand benefited. And this plays to the BJP RSS playbook of having more number of seats, MP seats from the Hindi belt.
Currently, there are 543 seats in the Lok Sabha. The projection is that 2026 onwards, there could be as many as 846 seats. As far as the southern states are concerned, the margin is lesser. As per the Carnegie Endowment Report, this effectively means that the seat share of just Uttar Pradesh and Bihar alone would go up to 222. The northern states will expand at the cost of southern states, whose total representation post-delimitation stands at just 164. Combining all 5 southern states with a representation of just 18% of the population, southern India fears that delimitation based on population would diminish their representation despite being the highest contributors to the country's economy. But the BJP didn't remain silent and opposed the states for stirring confusion over the matter.
डिलिमिटेशन कोई सरकार नहीं करती, डिलिमिटेशन कमीशन होता है. उस डिलिमिटेशन कमीशन में सभी पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज जो है वो अपनी बातें भी कहते हैं, उनके रिप्रेजेंटेटिव भी अलग अलग रूपों में होते हैं. इसलिए कोई ऐसा नहीं होता कि कोई फरमान जारी हो जाएगा डिलिमिटेशन का. डिलिमिटेशन क्या एक पूरा का पूरा प्रोसेस और प्रक्रिया होती है. इसमें कंफ्यूज होने की जरूरत ना खुद कंफ्यूज हो और ना किसी को कंफ्यूज करें.
So are the concerns raised by the southern states justified? Let's debate that on Sensational South.
Are these concerns justified? Will the process also take into account the kind of efforts put in by southern states to control the population? We'll debate this. We have an eminent panel joining us today. We have Mr. Putta Vishnuvardhan Reddy of the BRS. We have Mr. Kishore Podreddy of the BJP and Mr. Sajid Gowda, a federalism activist, joining us today. Well, I'll come to you, Mr. Vishnuvardhan Reddy, first. Why these fears now? The BJP says this is just plain propaganda. The process hasn't even started.
Well, let me just give you a brief history of how the delimitation occurred. So in 1976, Indira Gandhi government, during the time of emergency, has suspended the delimitation which was supposed to be done after the 1971 census. The delimitation process was suspended for 25 years. Yes. And the reason why the delimitation was suspended is because the Congress government wanted the nation to have uniform growth control, population growth control of uniformity all across the states. And the states from the south have heeded to that policy, they respected, and they performed their due diligence in controlling the growth of the population. Even in 2001, during Vajpayee's government, the BJP has again, the NDA government in 2001 has again suspended the delimitation process for another 25 years. That is why we are talking about the delimitation that is supposed to happen after 2026. Looking at the census, which would be completed in 2031. So it's been 50 plus long years. that the delimitation process hasn't occurred as far as the parliament seats are concerned. And this is the time when the discussion needs to happen. Lot of deliberations need to take place. There is a lot of complicated formulas that need to be involved to make sure that the south of India receives its fair share of representation in the lower house of the parliament. And also, apart from the representation in the parliament, the South India feels that, the process of devolving central funds to the South states is also based on
Yes.
the, population. And 60% of the weightage, which is given by the 15th Finance Commission, is based on the population. So there are a lot of factors that come into play. And we from the South, we want to make sure our voice is heard. We don't want to get penalized for following the policy that was rolled out by the central government. We don't want, we just want our equal representation and fair share
But sir,
of...
the
what
fear
we
that
got.
delimitation might happen in 2026, is it justified? Because the union government hasn't spoken anything on it so far.
See, whether it's justifiable or not, the debate needs to kick off. Just quoting that the population spurt has happened,
Okay.
you will cut down. I mean, you very rightly mentioned the Carnegie Endowment report, where, just two states of Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, they would go up to 222, and all of the five southern states of Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka, AP, and Telangana would have a representation of only 165 members in the parliament. Now you tell me if this debate doesn't kick off now, where the eminent panelists, the policy makers, every one of them have to, sit down, to do a lot of deliberations, come out with a formula, and you just can't penalize the states for following, the central government policy. That's what we are saying. I mean, the women are
Yes.
more empowered.
I would like
We
to bring
send
in
more
Mr.
girls to
Kishore.
school and-
True.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to bring in Mr. Kishore. Mr. Kishore, do you believe that somewhere the BJP needs to come out and make its stance clear on this issue? Because there's a fear in southern states and few other states where the population hasn't really increased at the rate that some of the North Indian states have seen their population increasing. Does the BJP want to come out and make it clear what its thinking process is on this issue? Because many of these parties are saying that if there is a delimitation in 2026, the biggest beneficiary would be the BJP.
Harish, good afternoon. First of all, the argument that there would be a delimitation in 2026. We have no information as of today that there would be one such. It has to happen after 2026, but would that happen, and what are the dates, and when is the delimitation commission coming into force, and all of that stuff hasn't been yet worked out, right? First one. So this is a hypothetical discussion as far as the dates go. But the rest of the argument we can still discuss, right? The representation based on population. South will be losing seats proportionately. Not that it would lose seats, it would gain seats. But proportionately, it would have lesser seats than the North, especially UP and Bihar. That's how this discussion is structured, right?
Yes.
So here is the point.
Yes.
Do we want everyone to have one vote, whether they are from the south, whether they are from the north, whether they are Hindu, whether they are Muslim, whether they are rich, whether they are poor, whether they are men, women, third gender, whatever, right? So region, religion, language, all of these bases, we can say what is a fair representation for each of these. Or does the Indian Constitution, what does the Indian Constitution talk about? Every right to equality, right? I mean, universal franchise is something the world has achieved only after centuries of fight. I mean, after Magna Carta in the UK, right? Hundreds of years passed by, and only in this early part of this century
Sir, but
did women
nobody's
get
talking about taking
Tomorrow,
away the
let's
voting
say,
right from any
as it
state.
happens.
That
Exactly. So, but are they saying
the debate here
I
is
mean, this is an
the
intellectual
debate here
discussion
is will it
because we
create
don't
an
have
imbalance?
dates.
Sir?
Yeah. So the imbalance is, right now, is there an imbalance or not? Would a MP from, let's say, Sherlingampalli, right, or Chevella, an MLA from Sherlingampalli or Chevella in this thing, represents a large, these things, right, set of voters, while in a rural area, they represent a much smaller set of voters. Do the population of Chevella have an equal right to be represented I mean, by similar numbers. I mean, do they have equal weight or do they not? That is the question. Whether it is Chevella here and let's say Khammam in Telangana, or whether it is UP and Bihar versus the rest of the southern states. Second point I would like to make. We talked about 5 states. Until a few years back, 9 years back, we were only 4 states. Tomorrow, let's say UP becomes 3 states and Bihar becomes already has become 2 states. Let's say it becomes another 3 states. Would that 8 states versus these 5 states, would it be justified then? See, because in our this thing, we are a union of states, and states can be made and unmade by an act of the parliament.
Yes.
That is how Telangana was made, reflecting the aspirations of the people
I'll
from
take,
Telangana.
I'll take that
so
to
the
Sajid.
number of states.
I'll take that
how
point
much
to
it should
Sajid
be,
Gowda.
All of that does not.
Yes,
not
Sajid
actually
Gowda,
bring.
what's the way out here? You have Mr. Kishore also saying that every person needs equal kind of representation in the parliament. Every seat needs equal representation in the parliament. What's the way out here?
So thank you, Harish. I'll go a little. I'll take a step back and give a little context to this. Indian Union, in its current form and shape, is or houses every 6th human being on earth. That is, every 6th living person on earth is here. That's basically how big this is. So, and the very idea that this can be controlled, managed, administered centrally from Delhi is such a not practical way. So, except for few of these important subjects which needs to be in center, and the rest has to come to stay. That is even more important here to understand, because now even today with 500 plus MPs, they're absolutely ineffective, and they don't really get time to represent themselves or their constituencies in the parliament, right? I mean, how many MPs really do make their points there? Do they have that right? No, most of them really follow the party diktat, and there is not much for them to do there. They just go because the system allows them to go there. So the larger point here is each state should have equal number of representation. That's how, I mean, the ideal state would be where Karnataka, Sikkim, Telangana, Uttar Pradesh, all of them have equal number of people sitting in the parliament, and then they have fewer subjects like maybe 6-7 subjects like defense, external affairs, and these kind of things being discussed there, and or managed.
But then, do you
and
believe
rest of them
in such a
move.
scenario, you will have a lot of imbalance in terms of a small state like perhaps Goa having more MPs, getting more MP-led funds, whereas a big state like Maharashtra or Karnataka having, say, 28 to 40 MPs, getting lesser number of funds?
Not necessarily. That need not be proportionately applied to the finance part of it, right? So again, on the finance, when you're redistributing the money, things that needs to be considered again in the 15th Commission, they already brought some of those points, is your achievements, how well are you achieving your health targets, your education targets, your social upliftments, and all of these things have to be considered. And there may be places where poor states can be supported or should be supported, but this can't be this disproportionately how they're doing it currently. All the states need to have some sort of autonomy in terms of how they have to manage their finances and also public administration. The current setup needs a reboot.
Okay, let me come to the political point of it.
Taking this to 8.
Mr. Vishnuvardhan Reddy, the politics around this is that now BRS is talking about this because it's not in power or doesn't have presence in North Indian states. That's the politics. If there is a party that's in power and if it suits them, they will go for delimitation. If it doesn't, then they might not. There's a lot of politics involved. How do we get around this and come up with a mechanism in case if the union government decides to have a delimitation?
See, Harish, this is the false narrative that is being spread around. See, we are a small state. We are a state of 4 crore population. We just constitute about 2.5% of India's population. But when you see what we are contributing to the India's economy, we contribute up to 5% of India's economy, right? So we are literally punching double our weight. In terms of population, again, we are 12th largest in the country in terms of population, but we are the 4th largest contributor to India's economy. Now, these are not the numbers that I am quoting or the BRS party is saying. These are the numbers that were published by the Reserve Bank of India.
Well, we're absolutely out of time on this debate, but one thing is very sure. Any party that decides to go in for delimitation will have to face a lot of backlash. We'll have to see if that will happen or if this will be pushed by another 25 years. Well, that's all we have in this debate. Thank you, Mr. Sajid Gowda, Mr. Vishnuvardhan Reddy and Mr. Pur Reddy for joining us on this debate. Time for a quick break now. On the other side, we'll get you one of the biggest newsmaker from this week from South India.